Assalamualaikum and a very good day. So today we're going to start with a new chapter, topic 3, MFRS 116 property, plant and equipment. These topics are going to be subdivided into various parts. We shall look at the part A. So we shall look at the lesson plan first, or the lesson outcomes. Students should be able to define property, plant and equipment in accordance with MFRS 116. Explain the recognition criteria of property, plant and equipment. Determine the initial cost. Show journal entries for initial cost and disclosure in the financial statements. Explain the accounting entries of subsequent costs and disclosure in the financial statements. Explain the accounting treatment of subsequent measurement of property, plant and equipment under cost model and also revaluation model. Calculate depreciation expense. Explain accounting treatment for derecognition of property, plant and equipment. State the disclosure requirements of MFRS 116 on property, plant and equipment. And the last one, prepare notes to the account for property, plant and equipment. So here are the examples of property, plant and equipment. As you can see here, we have some kind of machine, right? Airplane, vehicles, right? Used like for delivery, maybe for delivery or transportation of goods, right? Land, office, head office, buildings, and maybe photocopy machines, right? Laptop, computers, office use, all right? Objective of financial reporting, as in the conceptual framework, right? The objective of financial reporting is provide information guys, right? Information about the reporting entity that is useful, right? To whom? To existing and potential investors, all right? Existing and potential investors, not only them, but also to lenders and other creditors. Why they need this kind of information is for them to make decision about providing resources to the entity, all right? Why information about company's property, plant and equipment is useful to investors. As you can see here, a potential investor must decide whether to buy shares in the entity that owns and use the property, plant and equipment in their business operation. So potential investors need to make decision about this, all right? If I can highlight it, potential investors must decide whether to buy shares, decision on shares, right? Decision about shares. To inform that decision, the potential investors assesses the potential returns from investing in the entity that use the property, plant and equipment in generating income, right? They use the information, right? Next, those potential returns depends on the property, plant and equipment prospect for future net cash inflows. Right, the potential return depends on the PPE prospect. What that PPE is going to be used for, right? It is for to generate income. And consequently, the potential investors assesses the amount, timing, and uncertainty of or the prospect for future net cash inflows to the entity. So scope for MFRS 116. MFRS 116 does not apply to non-current asset held for sale and discontinued operation, investment property, right? So it is not applied for investment property, biological asset, or agricultural activity, exploration for and evaluation of mineral resources, and mineral rights and mineral reserves. So meaning to say that MFRS 116 does not apply to all of these items. All right, so involve judgment identification here. We shall look at the identification, right? Um, for identification, it involves judgment. Judgment whether or not there is any element of financial statement. So is the item an asset? You have to make decision. You have to make the judgment whether that item is an asset or not, right? So does the reporting entity have an asset? So you have to answer that, all right? When you wanted to identify those items as PPE or asset. So let us look at the item of an asset first. Okay. For an item to be classified as an asset in the financial statement, the item should meet or satisfy the definition of asset. All right. Must meet the definition of asset. If it does not meet the definition of asset, then we cannot classify the item as an asset. All right. So let us look at the definition of asset as in conceptual framework. An asset is defined as a present economic resources controlled by the entity as a result of past events. And economic resources is a right that has the potential to produce economic benefit. Right, so let us look at this. The criteria to determine the existence of asset as in the conceptual framework. Control of an economic resources as a result of past event. That right to, including the right that correspond to an obligation of another party, rights that do not correspond to an obligation of another party, and potential to produce economic benefits from. Let us look at example 1. Mutiara Cruise Berhad owns and operates a ferry that transport passengers, right? Their motor vehicles and goods between the mainland and Penang. The ferry service is the main business, right? So the ferry service is the main business of the entity. On 1st January 2007, the entity purchased a new ferry. So it purchased a new ferry on 1st January X7 for 1 million cash. The entity management expects that after operating the ferry for 20 years, the ferry will be scrapped. Means it will be disposed. All right. So question, identify whether or not the ferry is an asset to Mutiara Cruise Berhad. So meaning to say that here you are going to do the identification process. You have to identify whether those ferry is going to be treated as an asset or not. Remember that you have to meet the definition of an asset before you can classify the ferry as an asset, right? So let us look at this. So definition of an asset. Let's recap the definition of an asset. An asset is defined as a present economic resources controlled by the entity as a result of past event, right? An economic resource is a right that has the potential to produce economic benefits. So if you can see here, a present economic resource controlled by the entity as a result of past event has actually answered this question on identification. Yes, the ferry is an asset because it meets the definition as follows, right? It is a present economic resources controlled by the entity. How do you know it is controlled by the entity? Because you bought that asset. Mutiara Cruise Berhad bought that asset. You use that asset, the ferry, at the company's discretion, own discretion, which is at your own economic or business operation, that is to provide transportation services, right? So meaning to say that you have control over that ferry. And As a result, it is present economic resources controlled by the entity as a result of past event. Yes, it is actually as a result of past events since you have bought or purchased those ferry on 1st January 2017. So actually you have met the first definition of an asset. What about the second one? The second one, the company has the right to use the ferry, right? That will result in expected cash inflow. How do you know you can collect, you will benefit a cash inflow? Because you will collect money from your customer who use the services, right? For transportation from mainland to Penang, right? So meaning to say that you have the right to use the ferry because you own that ferry, you bought that ferry, right? So in this question, yes, you have met the definition or identification for that asset, for that ferry to be classified as an asset. So let us look at classification. Classification of an asset is important because it determines which standards to the accounting of the asset, right? So after you have classified those items as an asset, you have to determine the classification, whether it's going to be classified as property, plant, and equipment. Property, plant, and equipment is an asset. Inventories is also an asset. Biological asset is also an asset. Asset held for sale is also an asset. Investment property is also an asset. So the classification is very important. So next, we're going to look at whether those assets can be classified as property, plant, and equipment as per our topic, right? So to classify this asset as PPE, right? The asset should meet the definition of property, plant, and equipment. So before this, you have looked at the item to be identified as asset. You have known the definition of an asset, right? So after the item has been identified as an asset, now you have to classify it, whether what kind of asset they will be, right? So in this question or in this topic, we're going to look at the property, plant, and equipment. So if the asset met the definition of PPE, yes, then it can be classified as an item of PPE. So let us look at the definition of property, plant, and equipment. MFRS 116 property, plant, and equipment defines property, plant, and equipment as tangible item. Tangible item means it has physical substance. You can see it, you can touch it, you can feel it, right? Tangible items that are held for use in the production or supply of goods or supply of services for rental to others, or maybe you're going to use it as your administration purposes and are expected to be used during more than one reporting period, right? More than one reporting period. All right, next, let us look at property, plant, equipment in this illustration, right? That the purpose of that PPE is for production, right? Production to rental to others, or maybe to be used in as administration purposes, and the period must be more than one accounting period. You can use that asset for more than one accounting period. All right, so let's refer back to example 1. Okay, Mutiara Bahar owns and operates a ferry that transports passengers, their motor vehicles and goods between mainland and Penang. The ferry services is the main business of the entity, right? The ferry is the main business of the entity. On 1st January 2007, the entity purchased a new ferry for 1 million cash. The entity's management expect that after operating the ferry for 20 years, the ferry will be scrapped. So is the ferry an item of PPE? You have to answer this, whether that ferry is an item of PPE. You have known that the item is an asset. So this kind of asset is to be classified under which asset? Right? So let us look at this. Okay, recall the definition of property, plant, and equipment. MFRS 116 property, plant, and equipment defines property, plant, and equipment as, remember just now I told you that it should be an as tangible item, right? Tangible items that are held for use in the production or supply of goods or supply of services for rental to others or for administrative purposes and are expected to be used during more than one reporting period. So let us answer this question. It is the ferry an item of property, plant, and equipment? Yes, the ferry is an item of property, plant, and equipment because why? Because the reason you classify this asset as a property, plant, and equipment because it is a tangible item. Huh? How do you know it is a tangible item? It has physical substance, right? It is made of steel, right? And it is held for supply of services. How do you know it's held for supply of services? Because it's ferrying the customers, their vehicles, and their goods between mainland and the island. It is some kind of transportation services, right? So the ferry is expected to be used during more than one reporting period because how do you know this one? Because stated in the question, the useful life of the ferry could be 20 years before it will be scrapped. All right, let us look at the example 2, Pijot Berhad. On 1st July 2018, Pijot Berhad places an order for machine from India. 1st April 2018, machine, all right? Machine from India. The machine was delivered on 1st August 2018. The new machine is to be used in the production of furniture. So this is the reason for you acquired that machine. It is going to be used in the production of furniture. The machine has an estimated useful life of 10 years. So the question required. You are required to explain whether the machine is an item of property, plant and equipment in accordance with MFRS 116 property, plant and equipment. So let's answer this. Remember the definition of an item of PPE should be tangible item. Yes. How do you know it is an tangible item? Because it has physical substance and the machine is actually made of steel. Right. So what is the purpose of you acquired that machine? It is going to be used or held in the production, right? Production of what? To produce furniture, right? So it has met the two definition of property, plant, and equipment. So what about the last one? Is it can be expected to be used more than one reporting period? Yes, it is because the machine has an estimated useful life of 10 years. Right, so you can clearly see that this machine has actually met the definition of property, plant, and equipment. So now let us look at the recognition of property, plant, and equipment. What is recognition? Recognition is a process of including in the statement of financial position or statement of profit or loss of an item that meets the definition of one of those elements of financial statement, right? So furthermore, right, recognition criteria as per MFRS 116. This is important, right? An item of property, plant, and equipment shall be recognized as an asset if and only if, right? You must meet these two recognition criteria. It is probable that future economic benefits associated with the item will flow to the entity, meaning to say that you can estimate what are you going to get in return by using that particular item. Yeah? The cost of the item can be measured reliably, right? This is the second recognition criteria. So this illustration, right? Recognition of PPE, future economic benefits. What kind of future economic benefits that you will get from using that particular item, the rewards and also the risk, right? And then whether the cost can be measured reliably. Let us look at the first one. It is probable that future economic benefits associated with the item will flow to the entity. The management of a business would usually not purchase property, plant and equipment unless, so meaning to say here that you will not simply buy an item to be used in the process or in your business purposes unless it is probable that by using it in the future, there will be an economic benefit that will flow into the business, right? There will be some kind of return that you will receive in future by using that particular item. And this is usually acquire property, plant and equipment is to generate income, right? Of course, you bought an item and use it for income generation directly or indirectly from their use. Let's look at the directly one. If directly means that, for example, you're using a machine to manufacture goods for sale, like the example that we have looked earlier on the ferry. Ferry is used to ferrying the customer from mainland to Penang, and then you charge the customers some kind of fee for the transportation. So meaning to say that it is directly used in the business. What about indirectly? Indirectly, for example, an entity's head office building houses the staff who administer the business that generates the cash inflows, right? Your office building, even though it is not directly being used, right, it is actually indirectly used by the employees to generate cash inflows by by the operation or managing the operation of the business as a whole in that particular office building. So next, the cost of the item. This is the second element of the recognition criteria, right? The cost of the item can be measured reliably. The cost of an item of PPE can be measured precisely. You must be able to determine the purchase price of the asset, right? The cost, or if it cannot be precisely measured, you must be able to estimate the cost, right? For example, the construction cost. The cost of a retail outlet constructed by an auto dealer for use as a showroom to market its car would include many estimates, right? Example 3. Let us look at example 3. FG Bahad is an auto dealer company. The company recently purchased, right, a new trailer. The new trailer is to be used to deliver imported cars to its customer. Question: describe the recognition criteria for the new trailer to account for an asset under MFRS 116 property, plant and equipment. So meaning to say that here the question asks you about the recognition, whether this particular MFRS 116 PPE can be accounted under as an asset, right? Under MFRS 116. Right, so the answer, the new trailer can be recognized as an asset of the company and included in the statement of financial position when you must answer it using the recognition criteria as we have looked at earlier. The first one, it is probable that future economic benefits associated with the item will flow to the entity. How do you answer this? The new trailer was purchased to transport the imported cars to its customer. So this is the reason for you to acquire that particular trailer. And why did you bought this trailer? It is ultimately you ultimately bought this trailer for your business purposes, which is to generate income for the company. So, is the cost of the item can be measured reliably? Yes, the company can measure the cost of the trailer reliably when you pay the new trailer based on the purchase price as stated by the seller. Right? So, note here that the sentences in red are the recognition criteria for the MFRS 116 PPE. So that's all for part 1. I shall continue with part B later. Right, so these are the reference for this slide or for this topic. So thank you very much for listening.